Hello there, Rene Cusson, music chair for the BC Pipers Association here, and I wanted to share some thoughts on playing Birls with you. I want all of you to have a killer burl. That is the ultimate burl that you can play. By that I mean a burl that when you play it on the far side of a Highland Games field or across a parking lot or the band practice room, everything goes silent around you when you play it. Everyone turns their head and looks to see who made that magnificent movement. That movement that's like the shot heard round the world. It's the burl that has such distinct grace notes. We can hear each of them. The movement ripples out, and it is just a thing of such immense beauty. You know, our burl on the bagpipe is such a unique embellishment in the entire music world. There's nothing else like it. No other instrument has a burl. And all of us, let's admit it, enjoy hearing a fantastically made burl. You know, we sit in awe of that performer who gets up and turns out an incredible performance that has burls that just sizzle. We're just waiting for that next burl to come along if we know the tune. And it caresses us, it excites us. And there's no reason why each of us can't have that burl. That is, unless you do have some physical problem affecting your little finger. And in which case, work at it, follow the things that I'm going to talk about here, and just see what kind of a burl you can still produce. You may be surprised. Over the years, there have been many opinions about burls. The burl itself is a legend. Most everything else surrounding the making of the burl is a myth. I grew up listening to all the old pipers talking about their pet ways of making a burl. Or even you'd hear comments like, "Oh, that's not how you make a barrel." So you grew up hearing all these things, and eventually you sort of got to a point where you realized you kind of had to sort it out for yourself. So if I can condense all the bits and pieces of what I learned, a burl comes down to having equal amounts of low A and low G in that movement. How you move your finger to make them is going to vary. And for those of you who have not achieved a good burl yet, or are struggling with it in some fashion, it may be because you're moving your finger in a way that doesn't work so well for your hand. When we look at each of our hands, they all look different. So there's no reason to think that perhaps certain hands need to be moved in certain ways to produce better movements. But many teachers over the years, and still, try to apply a one-size-fits-all for their students. They look at what worked well for them and make the assumption that it will work for their student, and probably it will. But if you're not getting the result you want, if you're not achieving that killer burl, then you need to take a look at how can you produce that burl. So what do I mean by a killer burl? A burl in which we hear each of the parts distinctly. It just kind of ripples off the chanter. A person who has a great burl would also be able to slow that movement down very slowly. With complete control. Now granted, it usually sounds more exciting when it's played quickly, but even a slowed down burl sometimes has its place. You may be playing a slow air and think, well, my burls are kind of fast in there, perhaps I should open them up. Why not? From a musical point of view, why wouldn't you explore that possibility? Anyway, that's another discussion for another time. I just want to help you with your burls, getting them to the point, understanding how to get them to the point of being able to play them well. So here's the deal. First of all, you get in touch with your hand. You learn about your hand. Try making the burls the way that you've been shown. moving that finger the way you've been taught? And listen to the sound of it. Are you getting these distinct sounds? If you can do that, moving your finger with whatever direction and movement you've been using, then that may be fine, if it's not painful. Some people tell me that what they do is painful when they try to make a burl. I don't think the burl should be painful, so that may be an indication that a person's not moving their finger in a way that's conducive to producing a good burl for them. But we do want those equal amounts of low A and low G. So here's an opportunity for you to work slowly and find out what way that finger likes to move. And if your burls have not been up to the standard that you want to get them to this point, you may have developed bad habit in that you've firmed up the way you're making your burls, and it's not the right way for you. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't change how you move your finger. Just as a little sidebar, there was a point in time when I was around 30 years old when I was not practiced up for a major piping competition, and I ended up being given a tune by the judge, a tune that had a lot of burls in it. I hit the first burl and it wasn't good. I hit the second one and it was even worse. By the time I got to the third burl, it didn't come out at all. And I had developed a mental block just in the process of trying to force a burl when, for whatever reason, I wasn't managing to have any success. So I struggled for at least a couple of years after that. I'd go to play a burl and my finger would freeze. I started avoiding tunes with burls in them, which wasn't a lot of fun. And finally, I smartened up after a couple of years and said to myself, you know, you've got to learn how to make a burl again. But when I put myself back into the frame of mind of how I made a burl before, I would always find myself freezing. So my injury, if I can call it that, was a psychological one of some kind. There was nothing physically preventing me from making a burl. And in fact, all my other movements were sounding great. They were well controlled. It was just when I got to that burl and that neural thing happened and the finger locked. So I decided it was time to explore all those old myths about burls. You can't do them this way and you can't do them that way. So I started working on trying to move my finger in a variety of ways. I tried number 7 burls, backwards 7s, sliding my finger back and forth across the hole, which I personally have never been able to produce the distinct kinds of sounds that I want. One of these back and forth kind of sliding things, for me, and I'd be happy to stand corrected if someone can demonstrate to me a burl produced that way that has the sounds that we want. But when there's actually sliding across the chanter forwards and backwards, when I slow it down like that, you can hear that slithering sort of thing. And to me, even when it's sped up, that's what I'm hearing. However, if you're getting those distinct low A's and low G's that I'm talking about, however you're moving your finger, then that's fine. That's what you want to work towards. So as an exercise with my individual students, but also when I'm doing group work, ideal when I've got a 2-week session with the same pipers, say a mid to upper level group of players, we start off with a slow tempo, and I usually use a metronome, and I use a timer clock of some kind for 2 minutes of time. And we work at about that slowly too to begin with. Because what you'll find is if you're doing this for 2 minutes, many of you will find that you get a real burn happening up between your elbow and your little finger. And you may even have to take your hand off the chanter and shake it out and put it back on and try and get going again. You want to find that point where you can play for 2 minutes solid, moving your finger however you're going to move it, whether it's a tap, tap, or whether it's tap and draw, forwards or backwards 7, whatever sort of movement you're going to try to develop. as long as you're getting the sounds that I'm talking about, those very distinct low A's and low G's, equal amounts of them, then you're moving your finger in a productive way. So you start off very slowly. That's your baseline data to work with. And then what you're going to do is increase the tempo. Ideally, the point at which you work on this exercise, and it's true for all exercises, is the point at which if you sped it up any more on that day, your finger would just not do the work. So you want it to be just at that threshold. You want to keep it just where you can be 100% successful, and then just keep nudging it up. A metronome is useful with exercises for that purpose, because then we can say we had it set at so many beats per minute this day. We're going to move it up 1 beat per minute or 2 beats per minute and push it there. And again, you're aiming for 100% success, not 98%, 100%. If you fail to meet 100%, then you need to knock the tempo back and work at it so that you've got that control, because it's as much a mental process as physical at this point, locking everything together, making those connections from brain to finger that are so necessary. And ultimately, we're getting things into muscle memory as well. So work the tempo up using a metronome. Ultimately, you want to be able to start producing this movement quite at a fairly quick pace, not necessarily full speed, but up to 2 minutes. At that point, and if I'm doing a 2-week school, we often get to this point. We might in the first week get up to a good tempo in 2 minutes, and then we're going to be pushing to 3 minutes with that exercise too. When you develop that kind of control of your finger, you are going to be amazed by finding that you can get out there and crack off Birls like you've never experienced before. And if you have a dry spell, if you have a time when you just can't get the practice in that you need to, even going back to doing this exercise and any other movement exercises and so on in a controlled fashion, is going to make a difference to building your speed back up and getting the control going that you know you need in order to make great movements. If you have any questions about this exercise or any comments on Birls that you wish to share with me, certainly please get in touch with me through the BC Pipers Association, and I'd love to hear your Birls sometime. Hopefully you can take what I've told you today and produce the killer Birl of which you are capable. Have fun with it. I know I do, and I love knocking off good Birls. Cheers.